Hey everyone, it's the Eclectic Candyman here today with my Briggs Stratton pressure washer, and we're going to be replacing the pressure washer water pump right here. Let's get it fixed. All right, there's a few things to talk about before actually replacing the pressure washer water pump. Now, you've probably come to this video because you've already got the part or you're thinking you need to replace it. I want to make a couple of notes that on a pressure washer water pump like this one, there are a few serviceable items. Namely, on this one, these are what are known as check valves. You can actually take these bolts out and there's a little valve inside. If the O-ring is destroyed or if the valve is stuck or anything, you can actually replace these. Typically, if these are going bad, you have a loss of pressure or inconsistent pressure. So these are often a serviced item before replacing the entire pump. Another one is on the low pressure side here, where the water actually comes in, there's a filter. And as you can see with mine, it's pretty rusty. There's actually a little hole. It's in pretty bad shape. So this also can restrict water flow and prevent the pump from working the way it should. Now, one other thing to note is that these pumps have a service lifetime typically. So the horizontal pumps like this with the shaft coming out are supposed to be between 200 and 400 hours service lifetime. A vertical, if you have a pressure washer with a vertical pump, those are supposed to only be like 100 hours, maybe 100 to 200 hours. I can tell you right now that this pressure washer is 10 to 15 years old. It has gotten well over 300-400 hours of use. This pump is time to be replaced. The problem now, I have almost no pressure. It's working very poorly, so I've got a brand new replacement pump. Even if I could replace the check valves right now, who knows, I may not get that many more hours. If it was a newer pump or 5 or 10 years, 7 years ago, I probably would have tried that. So between this and the check valves and also internally, I'm not gonna take this pump apart, but if I did, there could be internal issues as well. So now, the one thing about the pumps as well that I want to mention is that it is good to try to diagnose and replace some of the serviceable parts at first, because unlike, say, like a carburetor on a small engine, which makes almost no sense to tear apart and rebuild because they're so cheap, this one's a little bit of an investment. I got the exact same one for about $140, although if I would have gotten it from Briggs Stratton, it would have been like $350. There are some non-brass models that are a little bit cheaper in the $100 range, but these parts right here are a fraction of it. So this is one that if you have a newer pressure washer and you take these off and inspect them and they're frozen or there's an O-ring broken or this is malfunctioning, you should try to diagnose and replace those first. But today we're going to be replacing the pump itself. One other thing I'd like to point out, if you're not sure about the anatomy of a pressure washer, all this going on right here with the engine is a means to an end to have a shaft that goes inside here. This is the only part that actually has water in it and gets pressurized. So what happens is this entire motor right here will turn the shaft, which ultimately will pressurize the air in the water. So this is the only part that has water. There is no water going in to the motor right here. So the mechanics of this are independent of this. That's why some people, I believe, make their own small engines. You know, when you've got the engine, you've got the pump, and you can put these together. All of this over here, you don't have to worry about. It's a separate component altogether. The mechanics of this, the piston and the carburetor, the oil, all of those parts are independent. So you don't have to worry about any water integrity on this side. It's only in the pump itself, and that's what we'll be replacing. All right, in theory, this is pretty easy to change because it's only 4 bolts. But because of the years of heat and cold and on and off, not only may these bolts give us some trouble, but actually sliding this off the shaft could be problematic too, and we're gonna have to pry it off. So we're gonna see what it entails. Let's start with some penetrating spray on each of these. Make sure we get that. We're gonna let that sit for a few minutes so that we don't have too much of a trouble getting those off. Okay, this next part I find hilarious. This is a 1/4 inch hex or Allen key that we need to get in here to take this off. For those of you that laugh that think I have all the tools, it's a project like this shows you can never have enough. So of course I do have 1/4 inch hex sockets, but this channel right here will not allow me to get that in there. That's 3/8. Well, I have another one out of a cheap set. Thought maybe it might be a little skinnier. Nope, that one doesn't work. All right, how about this one? That's an extended reach. All right, that's great. Oh, now I can't get any kind of socket in there at all. There's no reach. I might be able to get at that angle, but there's just not enough clearance right there to get anything in there. It needs to be just a little bit shorter. So then I found another one that's made for a screwdriver, and okay, that gets in there nicely, but now you have to use a little 1/4 inch wrench, and that doesn't provide almost any torque at all. So the very tool I did not think I was going to use, and I'm going to use, is just a old-fashioned long hex key tool right here, and that's what I'm gonna have to go with. So it would be nice if I had like a mid-length or a 1/4 inch version of this that didn't have such a large socket base. So who knows, maybe another tool I'll have to try to get in the future. All right, let's try to take this off. Yep, and they are frozen. Woo! Time to get, all right, time to get some gloves on so I don't smash my hands into there and start the day, end the day too quickly. There we go. All right, just had to put a little muscle into it. That's what those are for. Let's try to get this bottom one off. There we go. Broke that one loose. It's a little awkward to get in these angles here. Maybe, oh, on the bottom one, you know what? On that bottom one, I might be able to get this in there. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I don't have that clearance issue over there. I will over on the top one, but not the bottom one. So let's get this one off. Okay, that one was pretty easy. You know, I'm just gonna use this because pulling up is a lot easier. All right, there we go. I highly recommend that rust penetrating spray beforehand. These are nice and loose now. The new pump, by the way, comes with new ones. So, all right, I'll spare you watching me take each of these off, and we'll get to the next step of sliding this off. All right, so I got them all off. They do have some crush washers, it looks like, on there, or some type of washer, so make sure to gather those up as well. So now it's time to slide this off the shaft. Now, another thing you can do is that you can put your nozzle of the penetrant spray down in there and actually begin to spray some. It'll leak down there, that's okay, we can clean that up, but this is where I'm gonna want it to come off, hopefully with somewhat of ease. But the plan here is that there's plenty of clearance between the engine and here that I can apply evenly pressure with some pry bars on both sides so that I evenly slide it off. So we'll let that sit for a minute and we'll get at it. All right, so I already know for a fact, because I bumped it, that we're gonna have a good day and we got lucky. But I wanna go over the procedure just in case you're working on one and you need to pry it off because it's seized. All right, so I've got some pry bars here, and I like this flat style because I don't want to mar anything. And the idea would be, and you're going to see how easily this one slides off, is that we would put one on each side like this and apply even pressure. And like this, we would be able to slide it off. Now we can see with mine, it's coming off very easily by hand, but if we needed to, we could keep applying penetrant spray to that and allow it to free up and then to slide this off. And I'm able to do it with my hand. And there we go. Now, let's see inside there. It looks like we do have decent integrity with this O-ring clip right here. There is a lot of debris in here. So again, even if I had serviced some of these, the number of hours on this just wouldn't make it worth it. So we'll replace the whole thing. All right, next up, this key right here is a replaceable item as well, and I have bought one. And the reason it looks like this came off so nicely is because the manufacturer put some anti-seize on this, which allowed it to slide off. So that's fantastic. But I've seen other pressure washers that don't have that. I went ahead and bought an extra key, which is right here. In this particular one, I believe it was 3/16 of an inch square by 1.5 inch. Happened to be the weirdest size available that I couldn't get on Amazon and had to special order. So I'm going to take a look. I'm going to wipe this down and clean it up, see how the shape of this is, and if I need to knock this out and put a new one, or if we're just going to go ahead and install the pump. You might say, why don't you just go ahead and put on the new one? Well, again, if this one, I don't know. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Sometimes these are hard to get in and out. But let's take a look. Let's clean it up and take a look. I'm going to use just a little bit of brake parts cleaner to help clean this up. Now, if needed, one thing you can do is actually rotate the engine with the handle if you need this to come around, just like I did right there. So if you need it to turn, if the key's on the bottom, if it's not in the right spot, you can do that to help you out. Now, one thing we'll need to keep in mind is that when we need to put the pump back on, we'll get it in its spot and then we will rotate it into the right position. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our old new parts. So one of the things on this motor when I checked the parts is I saw this part number right here, and also it's ANNOVI REVERBERI. I'm sure I butchered that name, and everybody in the small engine community is probably like, that's not how you say it. But what that helped me was when I went to get the new pump, instead of using the Briggs Stratton number, I was actually able to use this one and find the identical pump. So here it is, the RMV series pump, same manufacturer as you can see right here. I won't try to say that again. What's pretty cool is that it's got all the specs in this. It has everything that it's made out of. It talks about, you know, the different metals. I'll show you the new one in a second, how to service the pump, the check valves, everything in here. So a lot of good information. This did not come originally with the pressure washer. It has everything to how to service that pump. Because again, when you look at the pressure washer as a whole, you know, you're talking about a $300, $400, $500 prosumer pressure washer that I've got right here. And so by putting another $150 into it, you have to decide, you just want to replace the whole thing, you know, especially if you start to have motor issues or something like that. But in this case, it was worth the investment. So next time, if I have any issues and it's earlier than the end of service of the life of the pump, I may follow these instructions and do some service internally. So the new pump comes with new bolts, like the ones I just took off. It comes with a new inlet hose, which is that one over there. So we've got a fresh one there. And then obviously the brand new pump. It looks fantastic. It's got all the parts. It's got this brass end, which is a higher end than some of the cheaper ones. So that'll last longer. Now, one of the comparisons I want to show you here between the two pumps, let's make sure I get them lined up here. So both of them have, here is the high pressure side. There's the low pressure with the new screen. We knew we had a problem there. There's the check valves. The thermal relief valve on this one is the bottom. That's if the pump gets above like 140, 150 degrees, it will have bypass where it'll come out of here. This is also a point of leaking on some of these, not new, but older, that sometimes you can replace that part. It's another serviceable item. The only difference between the old one and the new one is the location of that, whereas the thermal relief valve is over here on the right, and on this new one, it dumps off on the bottom, but that's not going to be any problem. So we'll get this ready to go on the shaft on the pressure washer. By the way, just to show you, that part number I was talking about right here, and the same one right there on the old one. So I know I've got the right replacement pump. But in general, remember what I talked about at the beginning, these are kind of a generic engineering. So there are a lot of different pumps that are rated to go on here, from the original equipment manufacturer to the slightly cheaper versions. All right, so next up, before we slide this pump back on, we need to, now that we've cleaned this up and we've got it in good shape, as far as the key, I'm gonna leave the original one on. After inspecting it, the integrity's fine, there's no cracking, there's no issues, there's no problems. Rather than knocking that out and trying to realign the new one, In this case, I've made the call to just go ahead and leave it as is. It's in good condition. The shaft's in good condition. We'll just slide on the new one. But what we need to do is put a bunch of anti-seize on this. That's what allowed the pump to slide off easily. So that's the next step. Then we can put on the new one. All right, so this is the same stuff you might use on like spark plugs, or, you know, usually it's good to have a tube around if you're going to be doing any kind of handy work. This stuff will save you. They even sell it by the register at like AutoZone and Advance if you forget and you just need a quick tube of it. I use it like that for several years. So we'll just get it in there, and I think that's going to be good. Perfect. All right, we are ready to slide on the new pump. All right, so the orientation, just like before, will be to have the hose, the low and the high pressure side on this side, the right side, or I guess if you're looking from the front, the left side. Now what we need to do is get this key right here, this notch, lined up with this. And remember that we can either slide it on and then just move it, or we can actually have it, we can turn the engine with the handle. Now I can see it's a little bit towards the camera, so I'm gonna just give it a little bit, there we go, a little bit. I think that's pretty close to alignment. Nice. Bingo. And barely had to move it. It can be turned with the pump itself anyway. You can turn it if you need it a little bit. I just was doing that to make it easiest. All right, now we've got 4 new bolts. And just like before, we'll get to have all the fun with no clearance here. Let me get my... And basically I found that doing this one by hand like this was about the best. This one did come with a new lock washer or crush washer of its own. So I've got this one started. That'll hold it in place. And now it's just the tedious manner, of, see, this is not ideal because now that's stuck. There we go. All right. So we got to get on each of the 4. There's really no magic here. We just need to get each one of these on. So one other thing to note, there was no torque spec rating. They just said to tighten them evenly. Let's go ahead and speed up the film while we install these. All right, so I got all 4 tightened down. I tell you what, that's super tedious, as you can see in fast motion using one of these keys. I mean, I'm so spoiled these days, mostly with electric or air tools, and then if I'm like, oh, I have to use a socket wrench, I couldn't even get a socket wrench in here, but no big deal. 4 bolts, they're in, tightened down. That's not going anywhere. Anti-seize, shaft's in great shape. Brand new pump, A+. So what's left to do really is just to add that inlet line for the soap and chemicals. So let's go ahead and do that. And this new one's a wee bit fancier than my old one. It's not super sophisticated, but it does have a filter on this side. And what that's for is when you put it down in a bucket with like deck cleaner or siding cleaner or whatever, it's not gonna suck that stuff up into the engine. So simple, probably 10-cent piece is actually a great idea. So that goes over onto this nipple right here, which is this one. So we'll just easily put that on. That's a piece of cake. And we have that ready to go. All right, at this point, we're done. We've got the new pump. Everything's ready to go. The only thing left to do is to test it out, start it up, and make sure it works and it solved our problem. Just a couple of final notes. If after replacing this, you're still having problems with your pressure washer, then it probably is over, as we discussed, to the other side of the fence. If the motor is running poorly, it's not running as it should be, and you had a false positive and misdiagnosed on the water side, and maybe it's the carburetor, maybe it's the engine if you have an oil leak. So it is important to diagnose correctly, but the focus of this video is just getting the water pump itself replaced. I hope you found this helpful. We'll get this thing fired up and working. And until next time, this is the Eclectic Handyman. We'll see you later. We got the pressure we expect. All fixed.